I'm sorry, but who is David Pallmann? This sort of says it all. Basically, he just like searches up David's name and he's just like, oh, this is him. And then, of course, David's like the only guy on the internet who's got like half of his beliefs right here. But then at the very bottom, he coincidentally just leaves it in, sales associate at Dillard's. And then it's like, is he really saying David doesn't have an opinion because he works in retail? All right, today I'm talking to YouTuber David Pallmann, who caused a lot of noise in the apologetics community. He made a post criticizing a bunch of presuppositional apologists. Another YouTuber criticized it. The very popular Calvinist presuppositional apologist James White responded, essentially saying that David said it doesn't matter since he's a kid because he works at Dillard's. He got responses from Cameron Bertuzzi of Capturing Christianity, Leighton Flowers of Soteriology 101, Robert Rowe of Sentinel Apologetics, and many more. David, say welcome to everyone. Tell them who you are and how you've been the past few days.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for having me on, Zach. I've been busy the past couple of days. I'm never been slammed with this many friend requests on social media.
There you go. That's awesome, man. All right, so let's get into it. So, David, can you read the original post that you wrote?
Yeah,
and
sure.
Also, I want to make sure you get the original emotion that you were writing when you were like, man, like this is going to be a good post. I'm going to write this. All right, give me this hot take, David.
All right, yeah. So bear in mind, it is a hot take, right? So for those who complained that there wasn't substantive interaction in it, this is why. But yeah, I wrote hot take. Greg Bahnsen wasn't a particularly brilliant or original thinker. Most of his ideas predate him and have been developed far more rigorously by other thinkers. I would go as far as to submit to you that Bahnsen's popularity has nothing to do with his rigor, everything to do with his rhetorical capabilities. I believe that his fans generally mistake his strong and confident words for sound argumentation. While we're on the topic, I don't think that Bahnsen is an isolated case. The Calvinist community in general is easily seduced by strong rhetoric, which tells them what they want to hear. Think of James White, Scott Oliphant, Paul Washer, Jeff Durbin, Cy Ten Brigg, etc. All of these gentlemen are, in my opinion, very shallow thinkers, and yet they are lauded by the Calvinist community. I don't say this to be demeaning towards these individuals or to Calvinists. I would simply urge those who listen to these individuals to be careful that they are not mistaking rhetoric for rigor.
Awesome. All right. Now, my viewers have probably seen this name fly around, but can you tell us briefly like who Greg Bahnsen is and also these other guys that were mentioned in this post?
Yeah, well, Greg Bahnsen was a popular presuppositional apologist, a student of Cornelius Van Til. He did a lot of debates with atheists, most famously Gordon Stein. He wrote several books, including this big 800-page analysis of the thought of Cornelius Van Til, and he's just widely regarded as probably the best proponent that has ever existed for presuppositional apologetics. Yeah. And he's also just kind of regarded as like this huge intellectual and Calvinist presup communities, which is kind of one thing that sparked the post. James White, director of Alpha and Omega Ministries, talks on the dividing line every week. Written several books, again, another big name in the Calvinist community. Scott Oliphant, I think, teaches at Westminster Theological Seminary, if I'm not mistaken. Paul Washer, more a famous preacher, has been big in like the Christian purity movement, the courtship movement. Yeah. Jeff Durbin, pastor of Apologia Church, and a very loyal student of James White. And then, of course, Cy Ten Brigg, famous internet apologist, and not so much anymore, just because of some things that have come out, but at least previously he had been a very prominent voice for presuppositionalism, did a lot of debates with atheists, Matt Dillahunty, and such.
Yeah, they definitely know who Cy Ten is now. Got like 17 different videos on him. But anyways, what did you, at the very beginning, you say wasn't a particular brilliant or original thinker, referring to Greg Bahnsen. So like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so a lot of people thought that was intended as an insult, and it's really not. So when I say someone is brilliant, I'm talking like you're in the top 1% of thinkers who have ever lived, right? Or maybe the top 5% or something like that. Like a very narrow slice of people who are really rigorous, really sharp, really, have made a difference. And Frankly, it's comparative. I've read Bahnsen's work, and I mean, I've also read people like Alvin Plantinga and Tim McGrew, and I read analytic philosophy almost every day. And there's a stark contrast between that and Bahnsen was trying to write analytic philosophy, but and I mean, I guess it would still qualify, but in terms of the amount of interaction he does with what I think are obvious objections to his arguments that he should be addressing, it's just not addressed. That's what you expect in good analytic philosophy. If somebody's really brilliant, I expect them to be interacting with their most prominent detractors. Bahnsen just doesn't really do that. And so that's kind of what I meant when I say he's not really particularly brilliant, even though he's held up as being like this uber intellectual. That doesn't come out in his writings to me, which is not to say he's not a smart guy. He's very clearly an intelligent person, but I don't think he could hold his own against somebody like Alvin Plantinga, Tim McGrew, Michael Bergman, just some of the other big name philosophers of our day. I really don't think that Bahnsen was on their level. As far as being original, this I was actually referring to a lot of the arguments he was prone to use, particularly the problem of induction. This is like not his argument, right? This came from Hume. He borrowed a lot from Bertrand Russell on this. If I'm not mistaken, even Van Til might have put this forward before Bahnsen. And really, most of his arguments he either gets from Van Til or he's developing the arguments from other thinkers. And this really shouldn't be that controversial, but it was just a point to make that a lot of the arguments that Greg Bahnsen put forward were not his own. He was parroting other people's arguments. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with that, but it should be acknowledged.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So was there something that inspired you, or like, were you like reading something or writing some other posts or whatever, and you're like, this seems like a good thing to talk about? Like, was there anything that inspired you?
I mean, obviously, yeah, it was generally motivated by the way that Greg Bahnsen was talked about in the Calvinist community. I'd probably been interacting with some people the day before online who had, for the 100th time told me, oh, you should read Greg Bahnsen, right? Because he answered all these objections to presuppositional apologetics, right? I don't think it was any one particular thing. It was just a lot of seeing Bahnsen continually lauded as being just this definitive great intellectual. I think I saw one book. It was titled Greg Bahnsen, the man that atheists feared most, and he was just held up as like, oh my gosh, the smartest man to have ever lived. And I'm just like, I'm sure he was smart, I don't question that, but there's just, I don't think his the level of work he does is of the quality that it could survive like the sort of rigorous analysis that contemporary philosophers would subject it to. And I think it's notable he did not publish any books, with like Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Rutledge. Like, these are the publishers that the highest level philosophers of our day publish with. Bahnsen didn't get published with them. He didn't even get his work published in like academic journals and stuff. It's not discussed by contemporary philosophers. Bahnsen is not cited by contemporary philosophers. And those are sort of the marks of somebody who is probably one of the more brilliant thinkers of our day, right? Like Alvin Plantinga. I disagree with him on plenty of things, but he's cited everywhere. Like in almost every philosophy book I read, I can almost guarantee you Alvin Plantinga is going to be in there. He's somebody who has really made a difference in the face of contemporary philosophy. So most philosophers don't even know who Greg Bahnsen is. And that is not in and of itself to say that he's not brilliant. I think his work makes that case, but it is certainly something that anyone who wants to say that he was so brilliant, they've definitely got to explain that how come almost nobody in academia knows who this guy is.
Wow, that's like super crazy. So you make this post. Eli Ayala responds. He's a YouTuber. He's got thousands of followers. Not a ton, not a huge guy, but he, people know him in the community. And he says, "Oh, Bahnsen, he probably he talks about Bahnsen and like, oh, David's obviously wrong. Bahnsen had all this education and he had all these rewards, and he knew everything." Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think that was actually, I don't think Eli wrote that. So I think right. Pallman actually wrote that, who, well, if you know anything about Paul, he's not a fan of mine. But yes, I think he actually wrote that post in defense of Greg Bahnsen, which to my mind, it looked like the two main points were that Bahnsen had a lot of degrees and David Pallman is not to be taken seriously. So those seem like the two main points there, which, I mean, it's fine. I mean, I agree with the first one. I agree that Bahnsen did have points. I don't think it follows from that he was either brilliant, original, or rigorous. I don't think that follows from the fact that he had degrees. And, whether somebody thinks I should be taken seriously or not, that's, entirely up to them. I'm certainly not an academic. But I think Eli, if I heard correctly, he actually asked Eli, or somebody asked Eli to share that post. For one reason, I have Pallman out of blocked, just because, again, I don't particularly like the guy. I find him to be a little bit, not to be insulting, I find him to be a little bit toxic and just sort of not the sort of person I like to interact with. So that's why I have him blocked. But anyway, so obviously the upshot of that is I wasn't going to see that post. And I think he wanted me to see it. So I think he asked Eli to share it. And I'm not completely sure about that, but that's how I've understood it. And so, Eli shared the post, and he since deleted it too. And I'm not sure if you want me to share this. But anyway, he apologized to me for the sort of storm it caused and such. He did, yes. Wow. I mean, I appreciated that. Eli did. I certainly didn't ask or expect him to, delete the post.
So Paul or Eli deleted it?
Eli did.
Really? That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I was looking for it and I couldn't find it, so I was a little confused by that. But that's super cool. But I mean, at the same time, like, this is giving you a lot of press coverage. So I mean, I doubt you're that complaining that much.
No, I wasn't upset about it. I mean, it's interesting. A lot of people since to me have been like, "Oh, well, you brought this on yourself and such." And like, I was like, I haven't really complained about this. I haven't like been upset or anything. Yeah. It's kind of been, I've been mildly amused and entertained by kind of how the situation just ballooned into what it did.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, makes sense. All right. Yeah. So Eli makes his post and he's telling all this about David and he's saying, "Oh, Greg Bahnsen's actually a pretty cool guy." And then James White responds. He says, "I'm sorry, but who is David Pallmann? This sort of says it all." Basically, he just like searches up David's name and he's just like, "Oh, this is him." And then, of course, David's like the only guy on the internet who's got like half of his beliefs right here. But then at the very bottom, he coincidentally just leaves it in, sales associate at Dillard's. And then it's like, is he really saying David doesn't have an opinion because he works in retail?
Yeah, I think it was Jhonathan Pritchett who first kind of started criticizing James White on that front, right? The screenshot got shared, and Jhonathan Pritchett posted it and basically called James White out and said he didn't have any problem. Of course, he said, basically if I won't use the exact words that Jhonathan used, but basically if I post inflammatory stuff on my page, people are free to post inflammatory stuff in response. But he thought it was basically taking a low blow or being underhanded, basically to try to discredit me on the basis of where I worked. Now, initially, I thought, maybe, that wasn't necessarily intentional, right? I mean, he was cropped the screenshot down. He didn't necessarily, maybe he didn't mean to include the job or didn't have any implications there, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I do work for Dillard's, I have that on my bio. It's not like a fact that I'm ashamed of. So I wasn't like upset by this. But anyway, so Chris Day privately reached out to James White and basically gave him the benefit of the doubt that he did not mean to basically demean me for working in retail.
Hold up. I'll read from that. All right. So, well, he said a lot of stuff, but basically something worth pointing out. He says to James White in a personal message, he says, "I'd like to encourage you to address the fact that your screenshot from his profile includes his place of work, which makes it sound like you're just missing him on the basis of what he does for a living." And then at the very end, he like says something nice, to be charitable, assume the best in James White.
Yeah, and it was surprising because Chris's message to him seemed like very softly worded. Like, just like it seemed like he was really giving him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't think that James White had intended to do that. And incidentally, at first, I wasn't even prepared to say that James White had intended to do that, right? I mean, obviously, he did obviously have to do some effort to crop down the picture. So it did seem like he had deliberately included that, but again, I was willing to say maybe he didn't mean to.
Yeah, he's trying to be charitable.
Right, but then he makes a post and he doubled down on it, and he was like, "No, yeah, it's relevant to assessing his opinion."
All right, let's get into that. Let's get into that. All right.
Yeah.
So we got the post here. So basically, got a whole long stuff. He's just summarizing like what he was doing when he was David Pallmann. Who's that? Like out of the blue, what? After his comment, he's just saying, "Oh, what's hot take? Did I miss something? Who's this guy?" And then he says, "I'm not even sure what he means by some of that, referring to the stuff they included in the screenshot: evidentialist, radical internalist, all this other stuff." And he says, "But any young man who puts all of this on his Facebook bio is hardly going to be in a position to provide much of a meaningful insight into the work of Greg Bahnsen. In fact, you would expect an evidentialist and a classical Arminian to not find a lot of helpful information in Bahnsen or any others listed, including myself." What are your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, he's right that I didn't find a whole lot of helpful information in that. But I don't think, by the way, that necessarily has anything to do with my being an evidentialist or my being a classical Arminian. Because, I mean, I have benefited greatly from many people who are in the presuppositionalist camp. I've read James Anderson and Greg Welty, who are probably, two of the best academic presuppositionalists working today. I have plenty of respect for their work. I don't, often agree with what they say, but, there's no question of the quality of their work. And I've certainly benefited from that. And just similarly, even like reading people like John Calvin or Francis Turretin, right? I mean, I've been able to learn things from them. Thomas Schreiner and Douglas Moo, both eminent Calvinist scholars. And I've learned, quite a lot from reading their work. Bruce Ware, another Calvinist thinker who I've really enjoyed his work, right? And I didn't include these names, by the way, on the list of people that I named, because I don't find them to be shallow thinkers, and I don't find them to be doing nothing more than empty rhetoric. They do quality scholarly level work that I've personally benefited from. So if James White's intention there was, and again I'm not completely sure, but if his intention there was to say, oh well, just because you don't agree with these beliefs, therefore you couldn't find anything of value there, that's certainly incorrect. I do find things of value in the writings of certain presuppositionalists and certain Calvinists, but obviously I included the people in the list in the post for a reason, because I was trying to say, I don't find these people to be particularly rigorous. And so, yeah, in one sense, it's not surprising.
Oh, David, man.
Too blunt.
Nice, man. No, that's cool. Didn't expect that. That's cool, man. All right. So then he continues. So I did not actually. No, I wanted to add something else. So yeah, basically he was like, so you put your views on Facebook. So like, just because they contradict doesn't mean that you can't have meaningful insight onto like the ideas of presuppositional. Like obviously nobody's going to agree. Somebody on the other side has to at least understand it a little bit and be able to give some insight. Like just because he disagrees, that's like, come on. And then so anyway, just to continue. So he says, so I did not say much about the topic other than to screenshot his own description, and I purposely included his own provided employment, sales associate at Dillard's. It's relevant. I saw nothing in his hot take that demonstrated the slightest meaningful knowledge of Bahnsen's work. And then, he says some like demeaning words, and then he says, you found absolutely nothing that would explain why anyone, and I would mean anyone, would care in the least about this. Any thoughts on that, David?
Yeah, in one hand, I had to wonder, like, does he not know what a hot take is? It's meant to be a short and kind of punchy, opinion on something. Of course, you're not going to find any. It's been pointed out by some people, like Nick Quinn, who you've had on the show, that White isn't particularly clear on what he means by meaningful, right? It seems to just mean anything that he doesn't agree with is not meaningful. But, obviously in a hot take, you're not going to find substantive interaction with Greg Bahnsen. And I don't necessarily expect James White to be aware of this, but it's not like I have not released an hour-long video going through one of the chapters in Bahnsen's book, Presuppositional Apologetics Stated and Defended, where I think I gave a very thorough interaction with the arguments he presents in that chapter. So it's not like I haven't done my due diligence in studying what the man believed, or if you want to put it this way, like I've earned my right to my opinion on him. I have read his work, and I don't find it to be, particularly rigorous or particularly persuasive. And I mean, again, anyone's free to disagree with that. This post was strictly my opinion, but in the sense that obviously in that post you didn't see any substantive interaction with Greg Bahnsen because it's a hot take. But that doesn't mean I don't have substantive criticisms to offer, and I believe I've done so in the past.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so he continues, a 20-something Armenian kid thinks Greg Bahnsen was not a deep thinker and is only popular for his rhetorical skills. Forgive me for not thinking he has read Bahnsen's work on Van Til, or if he did, that he understood it. So, like, you got that stereotypical, I mean, what we hear from James White all the time. Oh, you didn't understand Calvinism, or you don't understand presuppositionalism. And, like, you didn't even mention any of your views on it. You just said that you didn't prefer the guy.
Yeah. No, there were a lot of interesting things about that particular quote. I'm guessing James White doesn't know who Joe Schmidt is, but if you're in the philosophy of religion groups, Joe Schmidt he looks like Tom Holland, so that's fun. But we call him the Wonder Boy. And I think he's only 19 or 20. And I mean, he publishes in academic journals. I think he's just got one of his books published, or he just signed the contract for it to get published with Palgrave Macmillan, which again, that's an academic publisher. And I mean, he's like 19, 20 years old, right? He's younger than me. So, I mean, the idea that you can't, and again, I'm not professing to be as smart as Joe Schmidt. Clearly I'm not. But the upshot of that is just that your age doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't in a position to have engaged in academic work or to be able to comprehend or understand these people. And just kind of an ironic point is that James White admitted basically that he doesn't understand a lot of the terms that I use to describe myself. And I mean, I get that, right? Like maybe not everyone's familiar with terms like evidentialist or internalist or rationalist or foundationalist, right? But these are very basic terms in epistemology. So James White's not familiar with them. That's fair, right? He's not an epistemologist, so he doesn't have to be familiar with those terms. But then he also says that, forgive me for thinking that he hasn't, read Van Til or Bahnsen or that he hasn't understood them if he has. And it's just ironic to me is that I do know what these terms mean, right? At least well enough to assign them to myself. And that would at least suggest that I'm more familiar with the philosophical turf than James White is, right? It means I at least know enough about it to be able to identify where I fall with respect to some of these classical debates in philosophy. But yet I'm the one who supposedly isn't able to understand Van Til and Bahnsen, even though that's the area especially Bahnsen, that they tended to, publish in. And personally, I mean, I don't find Bahnsen that hard to understand. Van Til can't be difficult, right? He's writing in the continental tradition. He wasn't writing in English, so a lot of his works have to be translated, at least if I understand that correctly. So, but yeah, I mean, Bahnsen's very clear. He's not difficult to understand. So yeah, I mean, that was just ironic to me is that basically he says, I don't understand these terms, but also but then I'm not, qualified to have an opinion on it, or I couldn't understand them if I'd even read them. I found that ironic.
Yeah, totally. So he continues, I dropped the screenshot, referring to the original screenshot of all David's stuff, and he says, not for this young man, referring to David, he says, for I doubted he would even see it. I put it there for my fellow Reformed folks. Its purpose should have been obvious. Why on God's green earth are we even talking about a single paragraph that simply has no standing? It has no substance. Its author has yet to produce anything that would give him standing. And of course, my first thought is like, obviously they're freaking out for a reason. Like, David's very popular in the presuppositional community. Like, everybody knows you, like on these discussion pages. Like Eli Ayala obviously knows you. Like, you have a YouTube video with got a bunch of views. Like what is he thinking?
Yeah, and again, I mean, we can forgive him for not being familiar with that, but
Sure.
I think the implication there is obviously his implication was that I'm not the sort of person to be taken seriously. But one of his cited reasons for this, again, was the place that I worked and my age, and those just don't seem like relevant factors, right?
Sure.
Like if I was making basic blunders, right, like very basic philosophical blunders or very basic misunderstandings of the thought of Greg Bahnsen or someone, those would be legitimate grounds, I think, for saying that, okay, I'm the sort of person that's not to be taken seriously. That's not to say these sorts of considerations are completely irrelevant, right? I mean, I work at Dillard, so I know how many people there are actually like reading Greg Bahnsen or philosophy more generally, and it's not a whole lot, right? So, yeah.
What are you talking about? Not a whole lot. There's got to be one.
There's me, and then there's one other fellow I work with who's
Really?
also interested in it.
That's
And
awesome.
that's just at my particular location. There could be more else. But yeah, I mean, the point is, it's true. Not a whole lot of Dillard's employees are going to be interested in that. Maybe not even a whole lot of young people are going to be interested in that. So I'm not saying it's completely irrelevant information, but it's like anecdotal evidence, because obviously there's nothing there's no logical incompatibility between somebody being young and working a retail job and also being able to understand Greg Bahnsen. It's not like Greg Bahnsen is on some tier that like is unreachable.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So to continue, he says, I do not know Mr. Pallman, but I would very strongly suggest he takes the time to track down. It is available online. So basically, Bahnsen's final sermon. So he wants them to track down final sermon, and it's titled, For to me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. And, so it's like, he's talking about something very emotional. Bahnsen was sick, and he knew he was going to die soon. So that's the last sermon he ever did. And he's basically just saying, like, to live is Christ and to die is gain. Like, it's okay to, like, I'm giving up myself for Christ, and that's perfectly fine. Like, that was an awesome witness, but it also makes me really confused. And then he's like, I would like to think that if Pallman would listen to that sermon, he might hesitate next time before giving a hot take on a departed servant of the Lord who did so much in brief time given to him. So it's just like, what? Just because he obviously, I mean, Bahnsen, I mean, I don't know of anyone that would say Bahnsen wasn't a good Christian. I mean, I don't know, maybe they do, I don't know. But like, he did something for the Lord, sure. Like, but does that mean that David can't say that he wasn't a good philosopher or wasn't a brilliant philosopher?
Yeah, that was a very interesting part of the post. It almost felt like he was trying to like make sort of an emotional appeal, and the logic behind it is very difficult for me to grasp. I mean, are we saying that once a person has like tragically departed, and again, I don't want to like rejoice in that fact, not by any means. But are we saying that they're somehow now immune to criticism, that we can't like engage with their intellectual ideas and judge them to be sound or unsound just because the person is no longer with us, and they, or the fact that they did a lot of great work for the Lord, so now we're not allowed to like say anything negative about, again, not his moral character. I didn't say anything like, I didn't say that Bahnsen was like a bad person or anything. I'm sure he loved the Lord very much. But that doesn't mean that like intellectually we can't assess his ideas and critique them. I mean, this happens all the time. I mean, all the time in like academic literature, you see people interacting with like Immanuel Kant and David Hume and René Descartes, right? People who have long since passed away. It's perfectly legitimate to still interact with their ideas. So, I mean, I think maybe we see what his real motivation there is, that obviously he has a lot of respect for Greg Bahnsen. In not maybe not in an intellectual sense, but in one sense, I would have some respect for Greg Bahnsen as well. I think, it takes a lot of courage to go and debate atheists in the way that he did. But again, that doesn't make his ideas immune from criticism. So, I mean, yeah, I get that people are attached to Greg Bahnsen, and I've acknowledged this, like even in the hour-long video that I did, that I know that they, hold him to be very dear. And, I'm not trying to insult him in saying this. I even said in the post, I wasn't trying to demean him, but when it really, like, when push comes to shove, are his ideas any good? My own conclusion is no, they're really not.
Okay, so this is a response even later after that. James White says, well, we now know why 25-year-olds associated with Trinity Seminary pop off with foolishness. Their professors cheer them on. Infantile, childish, and shameful. Adults should know better. And this is a response to Jhonathan Pritchett, who, you know his position? What is he at Trinity Seminary?
I want to say vice president, but I could totally be wrong about that.
It's high up there. But whatever it is. But so, it's like David Pallmann has read more Bahnsen than 99% of James White fans. Changed my mind. This is from Pritchett. So David, have you read more Bahnsen than 99% of James White fans?
I don't have the exact statistics on what his fan base and how much Bahnsen that they have read. I mean, I'm sure they've got a few really studious people who like go out there and read everything Bahnsen has read. I really doubt that's most of them. Most of them like read, one, maybe two Bahnsen books. So, I mean, I think I would say it's fair to say I've read a good amount of Bahnsen. I've read his introduction, Always Ready, kind of his famous Presuppositional Apologetics, Stated and Defended. I'm currently working through, again, his 800-page analysis of Van Til's thought. Several of his PDF articles that are available online that, people have sent to me. I'm sure it's not everything that he ever wrote, but I think I have read a good enough amount of Bahnsen to have at least an informed opinion about him, even if I haven't, read absolutely everything that he read. But I mean, again, I think it's kind of missing the point of the post, which, Pritchett was just saying that, yeah, I have read a lot of Bahnsen, probably more than most of the people who are supporting James White and are getting enraged over this. And it was just kind of interesting. First, he's identifying what I said in the original post as foolishness, which, I mean, okay. I guess expressing your opinion on someone is considered foolishness. But I mean, then again, he did the same thing to me. But yeah, then I guess just getting upset at, Jhonathan Pritchett for... Jhonathan Pritchett has even said he disagreed with basically what I said in the post. Right? He likes Greg Bahnsen a lot more than I do. His bigger issue has been with how White is behaving through all of this. And so it's kind of interesting. He's not so much cheering me on as I think he's just having a bit of fun with the situation. And it seems to me as if it's really as childish and foolish as James White thinks it is, then why doesn't he ignore it? But he keeps addressing it. And so it almost seems like maybe it's not as childish and foolish as he wants to make it seem. And if it is, then basically by addressing it, it seems like he's being as childish and foolish himself.
Yep, that's a little awkward. That is very awkward. But no, I mean, it was funny because, for one, everyone knows Pritchett. Anyone who knows Pritchett, who he is, they know he's a troll in a lot of regards.
Oh, yes.
He's the bad cop of Trinity Radio.
Yes, indeed.
And, but what was even funnier to me was that, I'm thinking about it. It's okay, so how many people of James White's fans are actually presuppositionalists? Obviously not everybody. Probably a lot of them. But, some people like him for his Calvinism. Some people like him for his every other subject he's done. Islam, Mormonism, all this other stuff.
King James onlyism.
Yeah, totally. And maybe you're a fan of that too. No, you're not.
No, actually, that's I say that James White's best book is the King James Only Controversy. I was raised King James Only, and James White's work is some of the best out there on that issue. It's just amazing to me how rational he seems to be on that issue. Mm-hmm. But then when it comes to Calvinism and presuppositionalism, it's like there's just this shift in gears, and he's all of a sudden not as cool and deliberated, at least in my opinion, on those issues.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so this is a bit of I wouldn't say a mature one, but Presuppositional Apologetics, his cover photo is pretty ridiculous, and then he writes, James White, hold my beer while I respond with demeaning rhetoric and ironically prove David Pallmann's point. And Cameron Bertuzzi says, I worked at Best Buy for several years. I guess that makes me disqualified from thinking hard about God. Sad face, sad face, sad face. And then he says, I stand with David Pallmann. David, do you have any favorite memes?
That was a good one. Right before the broadcast, Vincent Blanchard put one up in the Trinity group, which is probably my favorite. It had a picture of a guy like all in black pointing a gun at somebody, and a person like like that. And so over me, it had my name over the guy is like that, and it has James White's name over the guy pointing the gun. And then in the next picture, the guy who had all been scared in the first picture, he pulls out I think an RPG, and it says the Trinity. It says Trinity Radio fans, and it had the guy in black running off. That one was maybe not completely accurate, but it was the funniest one I've seen so far.
That's awesome. All right, so moving on. So this controversy, all this stuff going on here, has brought up some familiar, interesting people in the apologetics community. So you got Garte, Lydia McGrew, Braxton Hunter, Leighton Flowers, Robert Rowe, as we mentioned, Joshua Swamidass, and of course James White, Eli Ayala, Cameron Bertuzzi, Chris Date, Jhonathan Pritchett, a whole bunch of people in the apologetics community that just, and pretty much all of them are like don't really like what James did, right?
Yeah, and to be clear, some of them have been, less explicit about it than others. Like Jhonathan Pritchett has really been a major part of it. Nick Peters has maybe just made some anecdotal posts about it. I think Robert Rowe did one post about it. Even Lydia McGrew and Joshua Swamidass have just made some comments about it, stating that they didn't approve, of what James White did or something, but they haven't themselves necessarily gotten involved in the controversy. They've just more or less offered some commentary on it. So I mean, not everyone has been involved to the same extent, but yes, I was just when it first happened, I was kind of just prepared to not touch it and let it go. And so many people got involved. Eventually, I had to address some of the things that were going on, and I shared some of the posts and things that people had made in my defense. But yeah, no, I was definitely surprised at the sheer number of people that this controversy attracted.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that's about it, guys. David and I are going to be doing a review of the Gordon Stein Greg Bahnsen debate. We were actually already planning on doing it, and then coincidentally all this craziness happened, so we're going to be doing that soon. Hope you guys enjoy. Any last words, David?
No, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on and just kind of discuss the issue, and hopefully that it clarified to some people who maybe thought I was trying to insult people like James White and Greg Bahnsen. I truly, honestly, have not been trying to insult them. My point always has been that I don't think that they give particularly rigorous arguments, and so just be careful for yourself that you are not mistaking strong rhetoric, which is what you want to hear, for actual sound argumentation. And if you disagree with my assessment of Bahnsen and White and the other people I named, that's totally acceptable. Again, it really is my opinion. I've offered more detailed critiques of why I think that elsewhere. But yeah, the purpose of the post wasn't to argue for that. It was just to more or less try to make people more aware of that aspect, as I see it as being a problem in the Calvinist presuppositionalist community. And as long as it's clear that was my main point, then yeah, that's really all I needed to make clear.
Oh, all right. And also, you kind of mentioned it, but I'm going to link David's video, Everything Wrong with Presuppositional Apologetics, in the description. It's awesome video. He talks about Greg Bahnsen and the views and why he actually, basically why he doesn't prefer Greg Bahnsen as a philosopher. But anyways, that'll be it. Thank you, David. Appreciate you. And we'll see you later, bro.
Oh, sure. Thanks.